Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2010 comedy drama film titled The Trip. Now, The Trip runs for 1 hour and 52 minutes long. It is directed by Michael Winterbottom. The script was also done by Michael Winterbottom. It is produced by Andrew Eaton and Melissa Parmenter. It was composed by Michael Nyman, I should say. Not Neiman, Nyman, sorry. The cinematography by Ben Smitherd. And it was edited by Mags Arnold and Paul Monahan. And the stars of the movie are Steve Brydon, Rob Brydon, Rebecca Johnson, Elodie Harrod, Dolya Gavanski, Claire Keelan, Justin Edwards, Margo Stilley, and Anna Stockton, Kerry Shale, and Marta Barrio. Wouldn't it be interesting to film a movie of actors who have known each get together for lunch to try exquisite food from the finest restaurants, strike a conversation about their daily lives while taking advantage to do funny impressions of famous celebrities? Well, in The Trip, Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon make that all possible as two not-so-close companions travel towards the northern English countryside to critique the local gourmet foods they were assigned to do. Well, actually, Steve Coogan was assigned to do. Rob was pretty much, just to tag along. We'll get a little bit more into that. While taking the time into liberty to ostracize the upper class while impersonating famous celebrities. From James Bond characters, like whether it be Sean Connery or Roger Moore or Michael Caine. There's a few instances where they do Michael Caine impersonations, each one trying to upstage the other. Al Pacino, you name it. They were pretty much doing them all. But just like their previous outing, Tristram Shandy, a cock and bull story, Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon are acting under their real names. And although Steve Coogan is Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon is Rob Brydon, they may be playing their real names, but it's highly questionable if they're playing who their characters are in real life. They're just playing alternative versions of themselves. Which means that although Steve and Rob are acting out as their real names, they're probably playing characters completely different than who they are in real life. It's just like if I was to go on do a show at Turtle Island, and my character's name is Eric Carruth Writer. I'm playing Eric Carruth Writer, but I'm really not playing who I am in real life. I'm just playing an alternative version of who I am. That's kind of like what you get from Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. Now, Steve Coogan was the chosen one by the Observer newspaper to travel to the English countryside to give his humble opinion about the food served in the fanciest restaurants. Oh, and he also gets to sleep in, all expenses paid hotels, so pretty much he's got it made. I mean, yes, this movie is, a bit of a road trip. It's a bit of a food tasting thing. and it's very, very dialogue oriented. So you're not going to see slapstick. The humor depicted here is going to be subtle, which means that it's going to be for adults. It's not going to be, kiddie fare. It's not going to be, over the top stuff with fart jokes or toilet humor. And you're not going to see too much emphasis on characters swearing all the time. Sure, there might be a few F-bombs dropped here and there, but it's not like one swear word every fucking minute. No, nothing like that at all. It's basically it's just part of conversations. When people swear in the middle of conversations, it's just to get people's attentions and to just make stories all the more interesting. If it's like if you're boring somebody to death and then all of a sudden you just drop a random F-bomb. That's basically one of the reasons why adults swear. Kids swear because they just like to hear themselves. When adults swear, we only swear just to sort of break the monotony. It's true. Look it up. That's why that's the difference between when an adult swears and when an adolescent or a teenager swears. When a teenager swears, they just want to do it for the hell of it. Us, we do it just to break the monotony of a boring conversation. That's why we do it. We don't do it because we want to or because we think it's fun or that we just want to hear ourselves swear. No. None of that shit. Now, the reason why the Observer is hiring Steve Coogan, who is a comedian, to go on this assignment, is because his credentials for his job was that he was being born in Manchester, England, and he also consumes a lot of food, particularly gourmet food. Not any of this not one of these greasy burger joints at some fast food restaurant. No, we're not going to some burger flipping establishment. No. We're talking about professional, actual chefs who had actually took cooking classes. Not just some rundown burger joints where they feed you greasy burgers and oily fries and all that shit. No. This is good shit. The food that they're serving is gourmet, expensive, crafty, artistic. We'll save the greasy burgers for another day. Or, since England is specialized in fish and chips, okay, we'll do the fish and chips another time. But we're talking, cuisines with a taste of culture, a taste of art. Okay? His original intention was to bring his American girlfriend along for the trip, but then she backs down. So then he brings along Rob Brydon to take over her spot and open-handedly offers him 45% of what's going to be given to him once their journey is over. But then we also notice that, so then Brydon says bye to his wife and his children and goes off on the journey under the gray and dismal skies. You would think that a movie that's about culture and food, you would see the bright skies in Britain. Well, it's not exactly always bright. In fact, the settings always tend to look a bit dismal and gray. Now, as you all know, some people often wonder why was it that Steve brought Rob along when, number one, they're not the best of friends. I mean, I'm not going to say they're the worst of enemies. I mean, they've never actually gone into any kind of conflict which resulted in black eyes and broken teeth. No, nothing like that at all. I mean, they're not like the worst of enemies where they would like to choke the living daylights out of each other. No, none of that. But they're not exactly, buddy buddies. They don't hang around with each other. In fact, they both seem to take the pleasures of getting on each other's nerves. And they actually are quite the odd couple, if you really want to know. I mean, Steve is, this spiky, aloof, self-contained individual. And then you have Rob Brydon, who seems to be somewhat a lot more approachable, has a lot more charm, and seems to have a lot more compassion to people around him. And people would rather prefer his company over Steve Coogan's. Because Rob, he's such a light-hearted, friendly, lovable individual. While Steve is kind of spiky, moody, and really just downright cynical. And while Steve is often lamented that, he's been in the acting biz for many, many years, but he still feels like his potential has always been wasted because he's not an A-list actor. He's kind of a B-lister, but he feels that he deserves A-list accolades. He belongs up there with the other A-listers when really he's just a B-list talent. He feels that, he's been in this business for almost 30 years, and yet he still continues to be mediocre at best. Whereas Rob Brydon, being carefree, hey, as long as he walks out with a nice big handsome salary, he doesn't give a shit if he's an A-lister. Hey, as long as he's got food on the table, as long as he's got his loving wife and kid waiting at home for him. Well, okay, I don't want to sound too sexist, because maybe his wife also may have a job too, a profession, and then they also get relatives to watch over them. I don't know. But you never really actually... But then again, Brydon's wife and family are not really featured that much, so I really don't know about their background. Because basically this movie is basically all about Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon and them trying exotic foods and sleeping in all expenses paid hotels. Now Steve Coogan, back to Coogan again, when he comes home from this journey, he comes home to an empty apartment. And there you see him standing near his window, staring at the city traffic below, in misery and disparity. Whereas Rob, he comes home and his wife is hugging him, and his daughter is saying, "Dada." And he's like the happiest guy on earth. And while Steve, of course, lives in a rather drab, dreary apartment, Steve lives in a pretty well-established townhouse. At least I think it's a townhouse he lives in, I don't know. Something like that. Maybe it's a cottage, I'm not sure. Or some of those detached row houses. Something like that. I'm not sure what type of house he lives in. But it is definitely much more livelier. But then again, Rob is a very lively individual, and Steve is a very spiky individual. Steve, of course, has also gone through a lot of problems regarding his personal life. His wife divorced him, his girlfriend dumped him, and he has also not been particularly I don't understand why is it that I speak in good English. I have trouble saying this word. Particularly, there you go, has also been somewhat estranged by his children. And then you got Rob, who of course is on very good terms with his wife and his kids. So we definitely have that odd couple trope featured there. So under the direction of Michael Winterbottom, the trip does have a by-the-numbers structure it follows. Yes, I mean, I know that sounds kind of formulaic, but that's exactly the point of this movie. Steve and Rob have a chat in his car. They strike a conversation over breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And because of the fact that his girlfriend dumped him, Steve, during his hotel stays, sometimes often gets involved in one-night stands with employees, which I think is a little bit risque, not just for him, but even for the employees and their reputations. I mean, I think that in reality, if an employee at a hotel has an affair with a patron, chances are they're going to get fired. They are. That's a violation. But he somehow still manages to get by doing it. And he somehow still... I mean, okay, you can argue and say that these employees, they're only on for just a brief period of time, and then you never see them again. But in reality, if this was real, which it isn't, this is fiction. In reality, they would have been fired. I'm sorry. That's intolerable. Coogan then we see Coogan standing beside picturesque landscapes, and believe me, the cinematography is really, really gorgeous. And then you have food ready as served to be eaten, and we get shots of the car going down freeways and highways. And of course, Rob will always try to find ways to do try to do impressions. And Steve, who doesn't consider himself doing impressions, eventually also seems to be somewhat quite organically natural at doing impressions as well. Now, like I said before, this movie is not, exactly... may not necessarily exactly hold interest to others. But to me, I think it's original for a plot device that has been done to death many times before, mainly because I like it when performers impersonate famous Hollywood celebrities and poke fun at their elitist demeanor they are most famous for. The nice thing about it, though, is that they seem very competitive about it, which adds to the fun and the laughs. And their impressions range from celebrities like I mentioned before, Michael Caine, Ian McKellen, Sean Connery, Al Pacino, Woody Allen, amongst many others. Brydon's impressive versatility of Kane's voice ranges from his much younger days in the 1965 The Ipcris Files to his later years where cigars and whiskey take a toll in his voice that, gave it that more husky sound later in his life. Yeah, cigars and whiskey will definitely take a toll to your voice, your vocal cords. It's not just played for subtle laughs, though, as there are definitely some dramatic tones subliminally played out in the narrative. And of course, there might be some rivalry between the two main characters, being the fact that they're not the best of friends, they're not the worst of enemies, but there is a great level of irritability between the two. But at the same time, they have a bit of a mutual fondness, while also they still manage to be annoyed by one another. It appears that Steve's relationship with his girlfriend isn't all that rosy, but that's not the only thing he's lamenting at, like I mentioned before. As a performer, he has been greatly overshadowed by the much bigger, high prolific stars, while he's been dragged down as a B actor when he believes he deserves more. He also feels more deserved of that spotlight than Brydon, and doesn't like being stuck as a one-dimensional comic actor. Even though, he's had his share of accolades. And Rob Brydon, like I said, he's humble. And he doesn't care about being an A-list actor or a B actor. He's just happy being in the profession that he has loved and adored. And he's just pretty happy with where he stands. He's not asking or demanding to go up. And this is kind of like something that I actually like. Just happy being yourself. That's really all that matters. But Steve, he sees things in a different light. Though the emphasis of the movie is the food they eat, it's really actually more secondary to the plot. At least director Michael Winterbottom arbitrarily takes us into these kitchens as we watch the cooks to see how the food is perfected. Remember, these are top chefs who took training in culinary skills, in the kitchens. Alright? They're not flipping burgers here, folks. We're looking at expensive food. Something that you eat from a shell, not from a bun. Not that I have anything against burgers and pizza and whatnot. But this movie, we're not looking at greasy burgers and oily fries. The main cuisine of choice is mostly scallops, which they will likely make my mouth water. And, I love scallops. While at breakfast, it consists of black pudding, which looks like something I'll never eat in my lifetime. Black pudding? Are you sure that's black pudding and not something I released when I first woke up this morning? Because when I woke up this morning, I looked like something that looked like black pudding. Okay, I'm not. Alright. I shouldn't be cracking toilet humor in a movie that doesn't have that featured. But I just thought I'd get it out of my system. Just like the stool that I had to get out of my system this morning. I had to throw that in somehow. The locality of their journey explores the beautiful landscapes of Lake District that seems to have some sort of connection with Wordsworth and Coleridge, where a mass production of opium is farmed there. There was some level of envy with the family dynamics that Steve and Rob have, while Rob's family is close-knit, so when Rob comes home from his journey, he'll be greeted by his wife and kids. Meanwhile, Steve has very little when it comes to family, except a son who lives far away from him and can only come home to a desolate, generic apartment, staring at the traffic of Manchester below. It's hard to wonder if the actors are acting in these roles or if they actually feel the way they do here. It truly feels more improvised than script written. But if it was written by script, they really do make themselves feel real. And just the conversations and the witty banter they have for each other seems that's something that they bring to the table, along with their filet mignon. And though it has documentary intentions upon it, it really is not one. No. The movie was actually based on their miniseries The Trip, with the exception that the food is being served gets more attention than it does in the movie. It boggles the question as to would we be able to see Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon act in another feature in a standard comedy film, playing roles outside their typical roles? Well, it wasn't before long, actually, that Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon would collaborate together in other trip-themed movies. I think in 2014, they did a trip to Italy. In 2016, I think it was Greece. And then in 2018, it was Spain. So they did other series of trips. The one we're doing focuses on England. But then I think next they do Italy in 2014, Greece in 2017, and Spain in 2018. There was talks that they were supposed to do one in 2020 for Ireland, but Steve Coogan decided to nix that idea. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that it's not on the table. He might consider it. But until now, we'll just leave it at that. So would I recommend people to see this movie? I would recommend it. But I think it would be best if you just watch the series. Because basically it's just the series and they just cobbled the scenes together to make it feel like a movie. It's not perfect. But, it's not for everyone. But it's still fun to watch. Especially when the pair does impersonations of each other. And I don't think kids would be interested in a movie like this. But I'm sure adults would, if you understand British humor better. Because this movie is about as British as fish and chips. Okay. So when all is said and done, I probably would recommend this movie, but don't go in expecting anything whimsical or spontaneous or over the top. It's more for adults. And unless you understand British humor better, or unless you can sit through it, it may not be for those who expect a lot. So if I was to give this a scale out of 10, I would give The Trip a 6.5 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Carruthwriter saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.